Have you heard? Metro by T-Mobile now includes Amazon Prime. Yes, enjoy the best of shopping and entertainment, movies, TV shows, music, free shipping, and much more. All included for just $40 per line for 3 lines. All on the T-Mobile network. Discover the smarter way. Metro by T-Mobile. That's genius. One offer per account. Offer subject to change. $12.99 per month value. Offer valid for new Amazon Prime members. Metro customers may notice reduced speeds versus some T-Mobile customers. Video at 480p. Capable device required. See store for details and terms and conditions.
He also said that every generation needs a revolution, Jimmy. The American dream is just that. Just a dream. War is a continuation of politics, only by other means. Politics is a continuation of economics by other means. This is our bank. This is our war. And this is our plan of attack.
Banks have become an essential threat to our democracy. So consider this justice.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the internet. Please help support this station so this battle can continue forward. Revolution Radio! The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Aloha, everyone, and welcome to Stargate to the Cosmos on Revolution Radio at revolution.radio. And I'm your host, Janet Kara Lesson, and my co-host is Dr. Sasha Alex Lesson. Our producer is Thomas Becker, also known as a Mad Painter. And tonight we have a special guest, Kevin Trimmel. And Dr. Lesson's running a little bit late, but he should be here any moment. So Kevin Trimmel is 29 years old. He lives in Ontario, Canada. And on November 12, 2008, he was bicycling in a forest close to where he lives. He stopped for a break and thought a cloud had passed overhead and blocked out the sun. He was shocked when he looked up and saw a grayish-white triangle-shaped craft, like the typical TR-3B, except it was grayish-white, not black. It was hovering only a few hundred feet above the treetops. The craft was moving overhead at a walking pace, only a few kilometers per hour, and so he followed it for several minutes, walking his bicycle as he continued staring up at it. That's how slow it was moving. And then, when he reached the end of the trail, where the forest opened up into a field, the craft began to rise up into the air, slowly gaining altitude until it faded from his vision. About 3 weeks later, he started recalling traumatic memories from another life involving what he would later find out is the SSP secret space program. The TR-3 returned in late March 2015 and flew over his house at exactly 3:45 a.m., then came back the same way it had flown over 15 minutes later at exactly 4 a.m. He would later find out from a higher self-channeling session with Karl Mollison, which has since been made public, that a re-abduction experience had occurred that night. So in June of 2017, he decided to do his first public interview with Denny Hunt on Why Is This True YouTube channel. And since he has continued to develop his SSP, Secret Space Program timeline, with the help and guidance of Tony Rodriguez, who also experienced a 20 and back. He can remember being loaned out to the ICC, which is Interplanetary-Corporate-Congl, for additional training and testing on Mars, where he encountered Elena, the Star Traveler, who at that time worked as an instructor for the ICC. He's spoken to Elena about the training program on Mars, and she was able to fill in some of the blanks. So he's still in the process of remembering everything that happened, but in the past few months, he made major progress when he was able to connect with Anthony Zender and KJ Scoops, who also have shared recall of everyone serving together on the program. As of right now, he has divided his timeline into two categories. The first being the physical external events that have happened to him since he was first taken in 2008, including a face-to-face encounter with the MIB, as well as 6 sightings in the white TR3 thus far. And the second category is the bleed-through memories of what happened during his SSP term, which comes back in the form of vivid, lucid dreams and flashbacks. So, Kevin, we had you on another show, so this is a brand new audience. So I want you to start from the beginning and go slowly and fill in the details of what happened that you remember and any additional regressions or what's happening now. Go ahead, Kevin, and take it away.
Okay, thanks, Janet. It's good to be talking to you again. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you great. Ahmad, is Kevin coming in?
Oh, he's fine.
Okay?
Yeah, he's fine.
Wonderful.
Okay, good. I guess this would be a new audience, new show, so I can start at the beginning with the intro there. You covered the when they first picked me up in 2008, and so I'm just going to jump right in to what I can remember after they picked me up. And one of the earliest recalls I have is they actually took us to the Arctic first, and that's just a brief memory of being inside the craft. And they have these view screens inside the craft, and I'm still not sure if they actually have actual windows at the front of the craft. You have 2 pilots, and they have these like a holographic interface. So it looks like 2 windows, but it could just be like plexiglass with a holographic interface with cameras outside the craft. Because what I mean is it looks like a window you can see through, but then their readouts come up on the screen, and the screen is actually augmented with holographics. So when you're strapped into the craft, and this is the smaller one, the white one that the Canadian forces use, you're strapped in and into like this roller coaster seat that pulls out from the wall. And I remember being strapped in. 3 seats were folded down on each side, and then when I looked across from me, I could see a 4th seat on either side that could also be pulled down. There was a gentleman strapped in right in front of me, and then there's another person strapped in beside me, 1 seat over, and so you're facing each other. And I turned my head and could see the 2 pilots, and on one of the screens, it was looking forward. But then on the other screen, it was looking straight down as it was lowering into this sinkhole. And so the craft lowered into this sinkhole. It was like snow-covered tundra, and there's this massive like sinkhole of a cave, and it was just lowering down into it. And then as it lowered down, there was this chamber that had been cut out of the side of the sinkhole, and the TR3 flew into it. And I kind of remember, like, I just got really tense because when the chamber wasn't that large. It was very, very narrow, and I almost felt like we wouldn't even fit inside this side chamber. But I've come to realize, having talked to other people who have been on the craft, that there is an AI, an artificial intelligence, that can pilot the craft like an autopilot as well. So I think at that point they switched on the AI to actually fly into this side chamber, because we just fit into this tunnel, and I think because of human error, they probably put on like an autopilot, much like they have like cars now, self-parking cars now. So it's almost like the same technology where it can scan the side of a cave or a tunnel entrance and can automatically fly into an underground base with only a few feet on either side of the wings, to make sure it doesn't crash into the wall. So that was kind of scary.
Yeah, I wish I had that sometimes.
Yeah. Well, it does make things safer. Of course, there's negative implications about the AI, which I can talk about later. But that was freaky, just lowering into this like hole and then flying into the side of this chamber. That's one of the first recalls I have. I don't really remember too much about what happened in the Arctic. But the first significant recall I had, this is the shared.
Let me ask you about that. Did they wipe your mind after the Arctic? You said you don't remember much. What do they do that you don't remember?
They wipe you when they put right before they put you back. So at the time, I would have been aware of what was happening, and like what Tony Rodriguez talks about, like if you do a 20 and back, like you experience the 20 and back, and then right before they put you back, that's when the blank slating occurs. So they just erase 20 years worth of memories. So it comes back in pieces. So like it's very fragmented. Unfortunately, I've done my best to try to develop a timeline to try to put it into chronological order as best I can. So one of the earliest memories, was like flying into that sinkhole in the Arctic. And then the most significant recall that happened next was the one with KJ Scoops. This was very early on in our training when we were cadets. It's possible this was the underground base in the Arctic. It's difficult to tell, though, because when you're underground, there's no windows, and
right,
and you have you kind of get disoriented because you're just in this underground base, and I've been really trying to go back and actually remote view it to get a better idea.
Right.
Where I was, but it's difficult. It's very scrambled, and also the power of suggestion is very powerful. Like if they put you at an underground base, they could say, "Hey, you're on Mars," and it's like, how would you know where you are if you're underground? You could literally be like here in Canada in an underground base, and then they tell you, "No, you're on the moon. This is underground, or this is underground Mars base or something." How would you know? The power of suggestion is very powerful. I've
been in an underground base, and I totally get what you're saying. You have no idea where you really are. You don't, like I was traveling, it seemed to be down and towards more of the center of the earth, and I don't know if I traveled miles, hundreds of miles. You lose all perspective. But what happened to me, and this may have happened to you, is my soul keeps going back there. Like in my dream state, I keep going back there with these kind of like screen memories, and I get there and I'm exploring all the time, and I'm trying to recover that lost piece of my soul that was left underground, trying to reconstruct it. So I understand what you're talking about. It's fragmented. Things come back in pieces. I've done several regressions. I could probably do several more to really get the whole story. But go ahead, continue. So who is KJ Scoops?
KJ Scoops. She's
male, female.
She's a lady, and she also, after she saw my first interview with Denny, she reached out to me and she said, "Oh my God, Kevin, I have the exact same memory of what you described. I think I'm the blonde girl that was sitting on the bed in the underground barracks that you were talking to, because." Before I get into her perspective, I'll share my perspective, because this is this is significant, and this has happened to a lot of people where I only remember so much from my perspective, and then you meet someone who has the same memory, but they remember a different part of it, and so you both have two fragmented memories, and then when you're able to actually talk about it, you're able to fill in the blanks for each other and actually retrieve the full memory from two different perspectives. So from my perspective, that what I remembered was being in this underground, Mayan-looking base. Like everything there was cut out of the stone, this dark gray-colored stone that, with like laser precision, it looked very Mayan. And what it was is this chamber with a couple side chambers cut out, and they had set up these like army cots inside these chambers, and there was 16 of us, men and women. We were all in our late teens, early 20s, and I remember sitting on one of the cots, talking to this blonde girl with a curvy nose, and but I couldn't remember what we were talking about. And then all of a sudden the lights go off, just like lights out. And then in the morning, 3 people were missing from our group. They lined us up in this corridor outside of the chamber, and I noticed 3 people were missing. And so far, I've been able to identify 2 of the 3 people, KJ being one of them, and also a gentleman by the name of Dave Marrow. He did an interview with the Basis series a couple years ago, and I was also able to talk with him, and he has the same memory, and KJ remembers him there as well. And so from my perspective, the lights go off, the lights come back on the next day, and she's missing, and 2 other people are missing. The third person is just blocked. I can't put a face to the person. I feel like it was a male, but I just can't put a name or a face to it. But I've been able to identify at least 2 of the 3 so far. And so I ask, when we're lined up in the corridor, the commanding officer comes out, and I ask where they went. Like, where are they? Like, where did those 3 people go? And he actually wrote down what he said. I want to get this right, and this is on my timeline. He said, "You don't need to know where they went. It's none of your business. Fall in line and keep your mouth shut." And then that's when my recall ends. So it basically said, it's not your business. Like, keep your mouth shut, like, and just line up. So that's where my memory ends. Now, when KJ watched my interview and I described this first significant recall, she remembered for years and years having the same recall of being in the underground barracks with Dave Merrill and talking with a tall blonde guy, me, on the bed before lights out. But from her perspective, she actually remembers what happened to her when they took her. And the reason why they took her was she was actually saying to people, we're going to remember this no matter what. We have to remember this. She was using the power of giving yourself an internal command in your deep subconscious so that you'll remember it later on. And it's the same. It's like what you described. Like, I think your soul does remember what happens to you. The blank slating is like a physical, chemical thing they do. I think they beam like frequencies at you, and there's probably some drugs involved, and they can chemically suppress memories. But your deep subconscious, I feel, is deeply connected to your soul, and it's subtly through dreams. It's subtly trying to get you to remember. So right.
KJ, I remember reading the Montauk books, which was back in the 70s and 80s, and they kept trying to do this wiping out of the mind, and no matter what they did, it's like the soul remembers, and it just keeps working on it, and eventually the bleed through happens. And so that's a real problem for them. They can't keep it blocked forever. I just wanted to say real quick, Dr. Lesson, are you there now?
Yeah, with this, when I just tuned into this story, one of the astronauts, who was programmed, and he just gave the standard stuff. But then he started painting, and at first he painted the moon, we know all the dull colors that NASA told him to paint, but then he started painting all these brilliant colors all over the moon. And then he remembered there was actually light hitting all the glass-like domes all over the moon and making prism effects. And, since they were trying to hide the fact that there was all these domes on the moon, that's what they tried to suppress. But the painter, unconscious, kept coming back to what he had really seen.
Wow.
So just to catch you up, honey, I know you were late getting here, is that Kevin has been in the underground bases. He first was taken up to the Arctic. So he was recounting how he had an experience with about 16 men and women in their late teens and early 20s, and a woman named KJ Scoops was missing the next day, and Dave Marrow. So, Kevin, someday I'd love to do shows, maybe do something with all of these people coming in, because this correlation of information with various people is what really, accounts, it qualifies as evidence, all these witnesses to the same thing. So, what was her name? KJ remembered what happened to her when they took her. So
yeah. So what happened was she was being combative. Oh, sorry, ignore. Sorry, someone's calling me. Anyway, so she was being combative. She was trying to tell people, like, we got to remember this. We got to remember this. So they removed her. They removed Dave, and they removed another person, the three that were missing. And what KJ was able to tell me, because I always wondered what happened to that girl, like that I was talking to, that disappeared the next day. And so she was able to give me some closure on that, because I assumed the worst at the time. Like I thought that maybe they had killed them or something. And she said, no, what happened was they put her in a cell for 2 months, like solitary confinement for 2 months as punishment. And then they transferred her to an entirely different program, quite possibly with the ICC. And she was trained as a pilot for a shuttlecraft, I believe. And so they basically just isolated her and then transferred her to a different program so that she couldn't interact with the people that she was, I guess from their perspective, being a bad influence around, saying like, we got to remember this. And because you are in like a zombie-like state. And so everyone's kind of entranced, and I guess she was very, very resistant to the trance and was trying to get people to kind of like snap out of it, you know what I mean, and say like we got to remember what's happening to us. So yeah, they isolated her, they removed her. I was happy to find out that she wasn't killed. She just got transferred somewhere else and has since come back, so she's okay. And at some point it'd be really neat to do a roundtable with KJ and Anthony. Her and I and Anthony, we did do a little roundtable just ourselves. And I threw it up on. I quickly made just a YouTube channel with my first and last name, and just to throw it up there. And that was awesome because the three of us were having recalls with each other, and it is neat to watch people piece things together, and try to connect all the dots. Because
we'll do that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, because while I'm on the topic of KJ and Anthony. Anthony, now his he was recruited by Kruger. That's one of the ICC groups to be a runner and a super soldier. He's an ex-Marine and MMA fighter, and he's like an actual super soldier type. I was never a soldier, but Anthony, he was definitely a soldier type, and something significant happened this December, actually. I didn't recall Anthony from my SSP term. We just connected after he saw my interview. He just wanted to reach out to me and and then he actually sent me some documents going over the various roles within the SSP to try to jog my memory. So we were in communication, and then we had.
This is Anthony Rodriguez, right?
Sorry, Anthony Zender.
Oh, Anthony Zender. Okay, and then it's Tony Rodriguez, right? You know Tony?
Yeah, I got. That's another story. I'm jumping around here a little bit, but I'll talk about Tony in a minute. I got to meet him in person in June, which was really cool, and he kind of mentored me a little bit in terms of like coming up with the timeline, But since I'm on the topic of KJ and Anthony, I'll just finish what I was saying about
Zender.
Anthony.
Okay.
Yeah, Anthony Zender.
Okay, go ahead.
Something happened where after we did this roundtable in October, I had an abduction experience where, and it was like immediately after. So we did this roundtable, and then I go to bed, and I had this abduction experience where this black SUV pulls up on my street, and I'm standing outside on the street, and there's three guys in the car, and so they tell me to get in. I get in, and the one guy says, "Give him the venom; it'll help him to remember." And the one guy grabbed my head, and I was injected in the back of the neck with what they called the venom. But it was like reverse speech or something, because it didn't help me remember. It actually helped me to forget, because after that abduction experience in October, I haven't had any more new recalls. I mean, I still have the recurring dreams of my original timeline that I talked about with Benny in the first interview. I'll have those as recurring dreams, which is still helpful because I'm very lucid during that, and it's like watching an old rerun of a show. I just kind of rewatch the memory, and I'm able to pull a little bit more detail each time from it. But I haven't had any new recalls since October, since that abduction experience. And then, but then something happened on December 5th of 2017, about 2 months after that experience. And this is a shared recall I have with Anthony, and this is totally outside of the SSP term that I was involved with. This was a live operation that occurred in December. Basically what happened was I was sitting around this conference table, and there's a bunch of people talking, but there's no audio. It was muted. So they somehow deleted the audio from my memory, but everyone's talking, and then Anthony is actually on like a video call. He's on a projector screen, and his just like a business meeting nowadays, you know, people will be on Skype, like a video call, and will attend the meeting through Skype. So it was like that, and then the memory jumps ahead, and it's me and Anthony, and we're flying in the TR-3, and we're strapped in, and he's beside me, and we're remote viewing a submarine that's directly below us, except it can't see us. We're cloaked, and the submarine is cruising on the top of the water. It hadn't dove down yet. It was just cruising on the top of the water. It was a black submarine, and we were remote viewing it through the floor of the TR-3. And they were having us track this submarine. So when I woke up from that recall, I messaged Anthony, and he's like, "Oh my God!" He's like, "I just had the same recall. You were there. You were at the meeting. I was on the TR-3, and I remember you being there." And so it just kind of dovetailed perfectly that, sure enough, we had the same recall that night. But he feels that was a live operation that actually happened on that night, and they'll do that. Like when I was talking to Elena about it, she said that, you know, you'll do your SSP term, like a 20 and back, but then even when they put you back, once in a while, they will pick you up and use you for like a particular mission. So they might grab you for like one night, they'll use you for the night, and then they'll put you back, and that's outside of the 20 and back.
Wow.
So that was my recall.
You're young. Did you have a 20 and back, and they returned you and regressed your age, or what was going on? And did you get paid? No, you don't get paid.
Did I get paid? No, I definitely didn't get paid. But in terms of the 20 and back, I mean, I remember bits and pieces, and I know they took me for a while, and they blank slated me and put me back. I don't know if it was exactly 20 years. It could have been like some people talk about a 10-year term. Some people do a 20-year. Elena has done 3 20 and back, so she's done 60 years in the program. So I'm not sure if I actually did a 20 and back. It could have been a 10 and back or a 40 and back for all I know. But that's just kind of like the term in the experiencer community. The 20 and back seems to be like the classic amount of time for them to get like their full money's worth out of someone. They want them usually for at least 20 years, and but at the same time, people sometimes drop out of the program. Like, so you could be 8 years in or 10 years in, and for some reason you have some kind of breakdown, or you get injured, or something happens where your whole unit or your team, they end up scrapping that program, and they might just put you back because it didn't pan out, whatever you were involved in, and that particular project ended. So it's really hard to figure out exactly how long you've been gone when they're using time travel technology and blank slating you on top of that. It's pretty hard to figure out exactly how long you've been away.
I totally understand. I find myself working in offices doing clerical things on different worlds, and then I find myself in front of it's like I do these menial things, and then I go and I'm like in charge of something, or I'm in a very important United Nations type meeting with all the different species that you can imagine. So I'm just trying to make sense of it too. I probably should do some more regressions. My husband's a hypnotherapist. Maybe we can set up do some regressions with each other, and we'll do some with you guys and see if we get more details, because this is a fascinating phenomena, and I think it's pretty widespread. And these people, like Sasha joked, well, you're not getting paid, but everybody's being used for their labor. You get no retirement, no compensation. You can be injured. I talked to a fellow in the UK. He got severely injured. and it affected his body, not just his however they were taking him. So, okay, but go ahead, continue with your story. Do you have any questions, Sash? While we're kind of paused right here for a moment.
I find it really interesting to get several people who have interacted in the programs and have them go down together into a hypnotic space where they start filling in each other's stories, and they help each other remember details, and it's really useful. Like get Randy Kramer and Tony Rodriguez and some of those other people that have been in the programs, and have them go deep together and just listen to what they come up with. It'll be really useful.
Yeah, totally. That'd be amazing.
Yeah, that'd be great. Kevin mentions Denny Hunt, Tony Rodriguez, Elena, the Star Traveler, Eliana, Anthony Zender, J. Scoops. I mean, maybe you could send me an email with the letter of all the people that you've connected, and we can do these different roundtables with the. Yeah. So I'm just looking on your description, and you mentioned a couple people during the show already.
Yeah,
so how
many
people have you been involved with?
Email. Yeah, I can send you an email. Kind of going over the role that everyone kind of played in my recall. Because it is confusing when with all the names. So I was kind of jumping around there, But yeah, I'll do a little bio, I guess, for each person, so you know which one I actually have shared recalls with, and then other people who just after they watched my interview were willing to just talk with me and help fill in the blanks. Like Tony and I, we don't have. He was in a totally different program. We have no memory of each other. He just kind of mentored me and helped me develop a timeline. So I didn't serve with Tony. But I did serve with Elena, Anthony, KJ, and a couple other people that haven't come forward yet. I'm also working behind the scenes with some people that paying it forward, exactly what Tony did for me. I'm working with some other people who are thinking about coming forward, but it's a big step. You have to come up with your timeline, right. And once you cross the Rubicon with this stuff. And you put your name and your face out there. There's social consequences because this is anecdotal evidence. Even if you have 2 or 3 people that have a shared memory, it's technically still anecdotal evidence, and you are putting your reputation on the line because this is technically conspiracy tinfoil hat area. But more and more people are remembering being used in the program. Basically since the end of World War II. There's been a secret space program, so there's quite a few different generations of people that have been used in the program, and it's literally millions of people worldwide have been used in the program, not just thousands, millions of people, but only a small percentage of those people actually remember what happened to them. A lot of people, the blank slating works perfect, and they have no idea that they were actually used in the program, and they might get the odd nightmare, but they can't really make heads or tails of it. But luckily for me, I think I remember quite a bit. I'm still pretty young. Apparently the bleed through tends to happen when you get into your 30s, and I'm only 29, so I'm actually remembering a little earlier than some other people have. But yeah, just to continue, because it's funny that Sasha, you mentioned the domes on the moon. What I remember flying to the Lunar Operations Command base, it was a dome, a camouflage dome inside a crater. So it just looked like this gray dome on the outside, blended in with the moon's surface. But then the dome opened up, the TR-3 lowered inside of this hangar area, and then when the dome closed, you could see out of it. So you could like it was glass. So you could see out, but you couldn't see in from above. It just blended in with the surface of the moon, and so I remember flying into the base, and something that trips me out is because when you're strapped in, you're facing each other, so you have to enter in like a roller coaster seat, and so. When I would turn my head, which was uncomfortable to do, but if you turn your head, you can see the 2 pilots, and they have the view screens, and so you can sometimes get a little bit of a glimpse of what they're doing. But they do position you so that you're not facing the same way as the pilot, so you can't really see out because it would be really uncomfortable to have your head turned like talking to someone when you're on a roller coaster ride. But I was able to catch a glimpse of the dome opening up and us lowering down into it. And then I remember they showed us off the craft, and they lined us up in this corridor, and there's quite a few people there, and everyone was just standing at ease, staring at the wall, just waiting for orientation. And I do have some memories at the moon base before they sent us to Mars. It was just it was like orientation. It was like a classroom setting with a regular projector screen, and they were teaching us about the densities. They were teaching us about the different xenotypes of different ET beings we might encounter. There's 24 roles within the SSP that Anthony sent me that document that goes over that. My role was an empath, so I wasn't a soldier, I wasn't a pilot, I wasn't an engineer or a technician. My role was empath, but more like ET interface, because what they would do is they would just put me into rooms, like later on after my training, they'd just put me in rooms with various ETs that they were either working with or had captured, and I was forced to interface with it telepathically, and those are probably my most unpleasant memories, because some of these beings were quite nasty and not the kind of beings you'd want to be trapped in a room with. Wow. So.
Did any of them hurt you?
Not physically, but just the amount of terror I felt. Like on Mars, I was in this. They put me in this room. It looked like a regular break room that you see at a workplace. It had four round tables set up, a little kitchenette like counter with a sink, and it just looked like a regular break room that you'd see at a workplace. And they said that the individual will be with you shortly that you're meeting with. So I'm like, okay. And to my great surprise, a raptor walked into the room, and it, like exactly what you see in Jurassic Park. Except its arms were a little longer. It had more like hands, like biposable thumb hands, and its eyes were larger and very human looking almost. The eyes were very large, but it had a soul. It was intelligent. It wasn't just like what's depicted in like Jurassic Park with it being like just a dinosaur that's a killing machine. This thing was actually more intelligent than I am, and it was a person. They called it an individual, and it was, and it came in, and instinctively I jumped up onto the counter just so that I would be, even though that's not going to do anything. It was funny in that moment. Instinctively, I jumped up onto the counter, and I'm sitting on the edge of the counter because I just wanted to be a little higher up than it, because it was at least 6 foot, if not 7 feet tall. So, and I'm 6'3", so I jumped up onto the counter. So I was just a little higher than it, and it walked up to me, and I said telepathically, "Please don't hurt me." And then it replied, "It's okay." And then that's right where the memory ends. So it was it was a fourth density consciousness, for sure. It was a physical being, fully telepathic, probably much more evolved than we are. But when you see something that looks like a dinosaur walk into a room, that the instinct was just jump up on the counter, put my back up against the wall, and it's just interesting how like your survival mode kicks in, and even it might seem silly that jumping up on a counter is going to protect you from a raptor, but that's what I did, and but it calmed me down. It said, "It's okay."
Let me fill in a blank for you, and Sasha knows about this too. We've interviewed Joanne Richards a number of times, and her husband, Mark Richards, is in jail for life, but he was in the secret space program in the military. And the Raptors are allies, and they often fight against other races, other forces that are, trying to take over humanity. And so they're very intelligent, just like you said. They're people, they're persons, and there's a whole faction that work with humanity, and they really care about us. So, do you remember anything about the conversation? What was accomplished? You met him? Did you
I think it was just even though it said it was like, even though it assured me telepathically, like, it's okay, I'm not going to hurt you. I think that the terror I felt in that moment, my memory just goes blank after that moment. And that's probably when he actually entrained me and probably wiped my memory after the entrainment, because I can't remember anything more than that. But yeah, that was scary. Another one, this is all when I was loaned out to the ICC. Another one, this one was definitely like an underground. It was definitely underground. It was this chamber, but like different than the break room with the Raptor. Like the break room with the Raptor, it looked almost like in a regular building. This other recall I have is it's like an underground chamber, very ancient looking, and they set up this little table with 2 chairs in this chamber, and I'm sitting at the table, and then the door opens up, and like a stone door that just slid, and then a long-nosed gray walked in, and that's probably the scariest recall I have. This entity was absolutely horrible. It looked like a gray, except it had a long nose. And it comes walking in, sits down at the table, and I actually do remember a little bit about that interaction. It was fully telepathic, using the entrainment. They just basically give you a massive download of information. The sensation is that they lock in on your eyes, and you can't really like look away from them. They pull you like into their eyes, and you just start getting information. And it was talking about how Earth is a genetic farm, and we're just beasts on a farm, and it can, and from its perspective, we were basically livestock, and that's just a part of the download I remember it giving me.
Wow. So what were you supposed to do with that type of information?
Well, I know that
it to somebody else.
Yeah, it's like they put these impasse, because not everyone can do the entrainment. You have to be very, very empathic. I am an INFJ in terms of the Myers-Briggs personality test. That's introverted, intuitive, feeling type person. Only 2% of the male population is an INFJ, and so they tend to use INFJs as empaths, and basically we're just very intuitive and receptive, and we're able, even though we're third density consciousness, we're still able to interface with like a fourth density being, which is fully telepathic. And so what they do is when they put you in the room, you interface with it, because a lot of these beings don't have a spoken language, so they give you this massive download, and then afterwards you put it into words for your commanding officer. You do a debriefing, and you relay the information that came through. And because not everyone can actually talk to these beings. There's many, many roles within the SSP, like everything from doctors to engineers, to scientists, soldiers, but not everyone actually interfaces or communicates with the ETs that are doing this joint effort thing with the human secret space program. Though usually it's the empaths that they will put in a room with a being, and like I described, you'll receive a download, and then you have to convey that information to the higher ups. Because not everyone is equipped to actually talk with them, communicate with them. Like if you're a soldier type, then they typically don't want to stick a soldier in a room with like a gray, because the soldier has been trained to fight and kill and defend, defend themselves.
Right.
And that might not be the best person to be like a diplomat, because they're trained to fight. And once the fear sets in, a soldier would probably choose fight instead of flight, right? And that would not be a good interaction. Right. So, yeah. Well,
that's great. So you have a very important role. So they probably won't ever really let you go. They'll probably use you as long as they can.
Yeah, that's something that came through with my higher self channeling session with Karl. I asked him, if they were done with me, if I had fulfilled my term, and if they were done with me. And what came through was once in the program, always in the program. And sure enough, they picked me up in December at least, and they used me outside of my SSP term for a live operation, remote viewing that submarine with Anthony. So yeah, they can pretty much just grab you whenever they want, use you, and then put you back. And sometimes you remember, and sometimes you don't. So yeah.
Well, I'm 64 and I still have missions to do. So, but I've learned to really enjoy them and appreciate them. And it's like if you meet them more as equals, they'll return and they'll treat you more like equals. But it took me a long time, because when you're younger, you tend to go like in victim and fight or flight and terror. And Whitley Strieber talks about that as well. Over time, as you mature and you get more comfortable, then they treat you differently. So I get treated like royalty now. Like they're very grateful that I'm back and I work with them and that type of thing. So it can improve. But
Yeah,
I think I would feel sad if I didn't get contact. It's like I get so excited. Oh, good, I had contact again. I did this and I did that. So I really enjoy it now. Someday you may too.
Well, one good experience that came out of all this, I talked about this a little bit last time with you, was when during training an accident happened, and I'm not sure if our craft got shot down or if an underground base was attacked. The accident was bad enough that I don't remember actually what happened. I just remember waking up in the what I call the Plearan sick bay, surrounded by Pleiadians, and they nursed me and the other people in my unit back to health, and they treated us like royalty. And it was an absolute beautiful contact experience being with the Plearan group, and actually being shown around their craft, which was massive. It was like a space station, and then being shown to the greenhouse they had, the interactive greenhouse in the center of the craft, and they wanted me to climb this tree as I was getting my strength back, and this Plearan man helped me up this tree, and we're climbing the tree, and then I look over, and this beautiful gleaming silver disc, the classic disc craft, just comes hovering up like right beside the tree, and I was so close to it I could almost touch it, and that was a beautiful experience. So if I hadn't been abducted into the SSP program, I wouldn't have gotten into that accident. I wouldn't have been rescued by the Plearans and have that like wonderful contact experience. So that was really amazing.
So there's some disturbing things, like we're just a bunch of farm animals from the greys with the big nose, and then the other species treat us with dignity. What's your overall opinion on that, since you've worked all these different things and you've talked to other people? What's really going on? Are they farm animals, or
I think it's
slaves, or...
Well, like there's this belief system, this ET belief system, because you have the genetic farmer races that came in, and like the Anunnaki, and they the ones that tinkered with Homo erectus, and they basically created the primitive worker, Homo sapien, and but you see those are ET interlopers that interfered with our natural evolution, so they imposed that onto us, that slavery system. They tinkered with our DNA. They messed with our society, most notably the Babylonian money magic system that we all live under, and then also tinkering with our DNA to make us into slaves. But that's not who we really are, and the benevolent ET races recognize us for what we were and what we are still destined to become, which is when Homo erectus, that was the sacred ape DNA. We were destined, I believe, to evolve from Homo erectus into Homo illuminus, and we were never really meant to become what we are now, which is Homo sapien, which is we're kind of a compromised species at this point because of the genetic manipulation. But I think there's hope for us because we come from the sacred primate DNA, and if you research the legend of the Monkey King, it's an ancient Chinese legend about what it describes is how the Monkey King is like we're all the Monkey King. Every person on this planet is 98% sacred apis man, and that's the sacred ape DNA. So we're all the divine Monkey King. And what's cool is being warm-blooded mammalian primates, we feel very deeply. And we also, being warm-blooded mammalians, we not only can channel an intense amount of energy. Our energy potential is absolutely amazing. But being warm-blooded, we feel good taking care of things. That's why we have pets. That's why we we're still in family units raising our children. No matter how bad the world is, everyone, is living still in family units, and that has to do again with being a warm-blooded, compassionate creature. So I think that if you're able to basically detox and kind of heal your DNA, you can actually get back onto the organic ascension timeline and basically step back into that timeline where we're supposed to go from Homo erectus to Homo illuminus, a fourth density sacred primate being with that has is warm-blooded, has a heart chakra, and is able to actually govern oneself more from the heart, opposed to the R complex, which is the predator gave us their mind, right? So that's why we have that reptilian DNA in us now, which has kind of compromised us a little bit. But that's an imposed belief system they put on us to make us slaves. We were originally divine creatures that got compromised.
Well, I've been tracking that story, and I have a couple of things I want to say in that. First of all, there's a report that we got that the reptilian DNA was added because there are species that are extremely violent, and they just come in and destroy whole planets and ecosystems and take all the resources, the minerals, and they just leave charred cinders. So I guess they were the basis of the the Klingons. They kind of just don't care about anybody or anything, and they just come and destroy. So there was some kind of agreement that was made where the reptilian DNA was put over into the humanoid form in order to create these soldiers, and that's why we have these super soldiers and secret space program, because these people know how to kill. Humans know how to kill. So that's one story. The other story is that the Anunnaki were in danger of going extinct, and so the higher dimensional being, I call them the Galzu, they were probably, pretty high up there, and they had a total awareness of the total story and the continuum, and they allowed this intervention to create Homo sapiens sapiens, so that the Anunnaki thread of consciousness would not disappear completely, and so they needed to have a hybrid species in order to exist. And so in some way we're here, and it's all in divine plan. But we are a slave species, but we do have the ability, like you do and others do, of waking up, remembering, becoming conscious, and moving into Homo illuminus. Anyway, that's what I'd just like to interject. Sasha, would you like to ask any questions or interject anything?
Oh, yeah, I sure would. What I keep wondering about, Kevin, is, well, first I want to know about your commanders and or who was in charge and how they treated you, and then in the unit, did you have particular buddies? Did you have roommates? Did people pair off and have lovers? I mean, how did you live?
Right. Yeah. The command structure. A lot of the time, what I remember is you're always you were never by yourself unless you were put in a room with an ET. But again, not by yourself because you're with the ET. But in terms of living, it was shared. It was like a shared barrack situation. You would have groups of 15, 20 people in a room, and that was your unit. And sometimes people would drop out or would be transferred to a different program. So oftentimes you'd wake up and 3 people are missing, and then they'd add another person in. So there's a lot of shuffling around. It's not like your unit from day one at the end of the term was the same people you were with. You got shuffled around quite a bit based on the various training programs they put you through. For me, I'm an O positive, and I was able to figure out that they were testing the O positive blood type against the rhesus negative, because the rhesus negative absorbs a lot more oxygen more quickly into the body, and they're very explosive. They make awesome soldiers, like Anthony Zender, his a rhesus negative, so he hits hard and fast. But their endurance, because they absorb a ton of oxygen really quickly, they're like a scorpion. They sting, 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 and then they need to recover. So being an O positive people, they have a much higher level of endurance, but we're not explosive. We're not like a hard-hitting, explosive type of person. So they were already heavily invested in rhesus negative, using them for super soldiers. And I guess part of my program was kind of a redundancy thing. They were just testing the O positives to see how they would fare against rhesus negative. So in terms of the command structure, I remember getting paired up with different instructors like Elena, and they would do these like endurance contests. The recall with Elena is they had us all jump into a pool of water, except once you jumped in, the pool was deep enough that you couldn't climb out of it. So you're just treading water with no way of getting out of this pool unless they were to throw a line down to fish you out. So you're basically in survival mode at that point, because you have to tread water or you're going to drown. And they were testing us to see if the rhesus positives would last longer against the rhesus negatives in that kind of survival situation. In terms of like the command structure, I remember like different instructors, and the instructor was in charge of you, just like in school. Like that was your teacher for the day or for however long you're with that person, and they're in charge of your group. And it was very much like school. And then I also remember after interfacing with the beings, being debriefed by I just call it a higher up, some kind of commander. The commanders seemed to be in their 40s and 50s, and even older, like in their 60s. And when I was talking to another experiencer, Will Glover, he was saying
Hold that thought.
Sure.
Hold that thought. We'll be back in 5 minutes. Take a commercial break. We'll see you in 5 minutes.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Did you ever feel that things were not quite right? That everything was just ever so slightly askew?
Do you have, to paraphrase Morpheus, a splinter in your mind?
If you're interested in hearing the latest information about UFOs, the paranormal,
ancient cultures and structures,
monatomic elements,
longevity,
fantastic discoveries in science,
downloaded to your brain,
then tune into us. Hi, I'm Dave.
And I'm Mackie.
And we are Shiny Side Out, Sundays 2 to 4 a.m. Eastern. See you then.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Join me weekdays for my new show, Tell Chris Joe. It's going to be a problem show brought to you live from Kensington. Thursdays, I'm dealing with hot topics, heated debate, what's new around the world, and ring-ins to discuss listeners' problems and offering considered and heartfelt solutions. So join me, Chris Hart, for Tell Chris Joe. Stop what you're doing, grab a cup of tea. I'm coming live from Kensington. Relax, let me entertain you with a coffee bar online. Listeners' very personal problems. So that's Thursdays, 2 p.m. in the afternoon, Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. See you there. It's going to be lots of fun.
Is your data safe? Do you have the necessary information to assist you in confidently living through just about any survival situation? Is survival and gardening, off-grid living, medical knowledge, or even natural or man-made EMPs on your list of personal concerns? Do you have your documents and your personal information in a safe place in your hands where you know where it is? Well, check out our preloaded EMP-proof thumb drive. Over 3 gigs of survival documents and how-tos, plus the USDA offline food preservation website, and much, much more, including a surprise bonus we just can't tell you about here. With plenty of room left over to store your most important documents. Imagine if a megavirus or a computer failure took out your bank, or all the banks for that matter. Are your banking records safe in your hands? So when they get things fixed and repaired, you can say, hey, look, this is what I had. You have it. I want it back. Is your personal data safe? Family records, addresses, phone numbers? Well, squeeze on over to freedomslips.com. Yes, that's www.freedomslips.com. Click the banner on the homepage for the EMP-proof bullet drive to get the full scoop of everything that we offer. So, folks, keep your data safe for your peace of mind. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Looking for a nightcap to fill your listening needs? Come join us on Spaced Out Radio with me, Dave Scott, right here on Revolution Radio. Monday through Friday for 3 hours a night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, we will take you down the supernatural path. From ET contact to the paranormal and all of the spiritual, cryptid, and conspiracy stories in between. You get this right here on Revolution Radio, at spacedoutradio.com, on Twitter at spacedoutradio, and on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show. Spaced Out Radio. It's a night of talk and interaction. Are you experienced?
Let us play with all our toys and let us think that we're
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
And aloha, and we are back. This is Stargate to the Cosmos on Revolution Radio at revolution.radio. And I'm Danica Lesson, your host, with Sasha Lesson. What's going on? We're on live, buddy. Go get on.
My computer turned itself off.
Okay, Matt, go reboot your computer. You'll have to pull Sasha back on his computer. I guess went down for a reason, so we'll get him back on. Our producer is Thomas Becker, and our guest is Kevin Trimmel. So while we're getting Sasha, Dr. Lesson back on, I'd like to remind everybody to go over to the donation button on revolution.radio and make your donation this week, 5, 10, 15, 20, whatever you donate, 100, will be greatly appreciated. And a Mad Painter, what's going on with where are we in the count?
I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm not on that page at the moment.
Okay, that's okay then. Alrighty, so I guess as soon as you see Sasha come back on, I'll try to pull him in. And so Kevin, we were talking about how you were debriefed by the commander, and they seem to be older, in their 40s, 50s, or 60s.
Yeah. So this is something I was talking about with Will Glover. He's another SSP experiencer that came forward on Denny Hunt's Why Is This True YouTube channel, and him and I did a roundtable with Tony Rodriguez, and Will was able to fill in some of the blanks for me as well, because what he mentioned to me was that when you're used for your first term, you're doing training, orientation, you're like a cadet, and slowly you become like a junior officer by the end of that term. Typically, you do a couple terms. Will, he's been able to remember 2 20 and backs, and what he was saying was that in his second 20 and back, he found himself in a leadership role. and I believe he's in his late 30s now, and he found that when he came back a second time, he was in more of a leadership role, and he was even involved in training others. So when you're debriefed, you're debriefed by basically SSP veterans, people that have already done a 20 and back, and they're on to their second 20 and back or third 20 and back, as the case may be. So at the very end of my first term, I do remember my debriefing, and I feel like this was actually on Earth, somewhere in Eastern Europe, up in the mountains. It could be the Caucasus Mountains. It looked like, well, if you're a remote viewer, you'll know what I mean by it. It felt like it was in Russia or Eastern Europe somewhere, and it was like this hotel with windows on either side, this banquet room, windows on each side. You could see the mountains on either side, and there was a gentleman sitting there, and he looked like he was about 50, 55 years old. He was bald with glasses, and he was there to debrief me, and he had a set of questions. He asked me that, and I knew I had to answer correctly or they wouldn't put me back. But what was interesting was this debriefing was fully telepathic. So he, just like the ETs do, he locks eyes with me, and he is reaching into my mind and basically scanning my memories, asking me some questions telepathically. And we got to the part in my recall where I was starting to remember when the Pleiadians had rescued us, and actually seeing the silver disc. And I considered this person that debriefed me to be a white hat, because he said to me telepathically, don't mention that, don't say that, don't. He just said don't. Literally just that, just don't. So I stopped. Wow. I stopped, like, in my tracks. I just stopped having that memory that I was passing on to him about the Pleiadians rescuing us and putting us back, because he knew that if the upper echelon, the really high up people, if they found out that I had interaction with the Pleiadians and I was that close to one of those discs, they probably wouldn't put me back, or they would have interrogated me intensely to find out every last detail of what their craft looked like on the inside, what the beings, looked like, because they're obsessed with, like, the true beam ships, those silver discs. They're obsessed with reverse engineering them. They've gotten bits and pieces of crashed discs, and as we know, and they've reverse engineered, and they've created the alien reproduction vehicles, but they've never gotten their hands on an actual intact, Pleiadian beam ship. And because I got that close to one, and I had interacted with them, they probably would have interrogated me and basically held me hostage until they got every scrap of information out of me. So this white hat, I think he literally saved my life in the end, and just said, don't. He's like, don't even, don't go there. So I consider that probably like a mid-level commander. So he probably... So
was he definitely human? He wasn't someone that was shape-shifting. He was a human with the full abilities to telepathically connect and download, just like extraterrestrials?
He was human. He was human. He was most likely another ET interface, an empath, but but had become like a senior officer at that point. He could have been on his third 20 and back, and it was responsible for debriefing people. And I would say he's about 55 years old. I'm guessing, but he was an older gentleman. So that I consider him like a senior officer. The true commanders, if you want to call them that, the people who are actually in charge of these programs, you never see them. They're the shadowy elite that are pulling the strings, behind the scenes, and they have the money, and right. they're the inner circle. There's like 200 nobility families worldwide that that are financing various secret space programs, including the ICC, Solar Warden, Darkfleet, Nakwaffen. So, but in terms of tracing back the money, it all goes back to these nobility families worldwide, not just European nobility families, but Asian, African, Middle Eastern nobility families that have that are the old money, and they're actually financing secret space programs.
Okay, so I want to get my head around that. We're having trouble getting Sasha on, so he's just going to stand here and be. We took the headphone off, and is the sound okay? Thomas, can you hear us? Okay.
You were echoing. Your speaker up too loud.
Yeah, we're getting an echo.
You sit here, Sasha. I'm going to put you on this, and I'll go into the other room. And 1 second, let me get him on this. 1 second. Sorry about this. He's having trouble getting back on, but I can figure it out. Okay, 1 second. Okay, Sasha, put this on and ask how the sound is. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, go ahead. Continue. I'm going to go get on in the other room.
Okay. So I don't know what has been transpired. Suddenly my Toshiba said, "You will need a robot." And after that, everything turned itself off. And so I don't know if I've been attacked or what happened, but I haven't been able to get back on. Janet's going to try to help. So I don't know what you said while I was gone, but what I was interested in before we resumed was the way the different commanders, particularly the one that you had trouble with, put you through. Just what did you mean by that? What was difficult about that?
Okay. So Elena, being an ICC instructor, that was the endurance test where we were treading water, and and some of people drowned, and I was.
Oh my gosh!
And I was like the third one, and there's two others, and I also remember drowning, and she's just standing on the edge of the pool, and communicating telepathically as well, trying to tell us like what to do to survive the endurance contest, which was you had to use qigong underwater. So you create like an energy bubble, and you could actually practice levitating, but in the water. So the only way you could survive long enough is if you made this energy bubble around you in the water that helped keep you afloat. If you just use brute force and you just kept moving your arms and legs without actually doing the energy work to keep you afloat, eventually you would just tire out and you would drown. So I did my best. I was communicating with her telepathically. I started making the energy bubble. I was able to stay afloat till I was the third one, but even using channeling the energy, eventually I just ran out of energy. But I made it to the third one. I know there was two other people ahead of me in the water, and they seemed to be able to continually create this energy bubble. And then, so I remember Elena basically letting me drown, which is a pretty traumatic memory. I had that recall for years. I remember this blonde lady with curly hair in this like black jumpsuit thing, like a wetsuit, and standing on the edge of the pool. We're all treading water, and she is communicating to us to make this energy bubble. So I had that traumatic recall, and when I did my first interview with Denny Hunt, I decided to leave that part out because I had just come across his YouTube channel that month, and Elena had been interviewed by him previously, and I remembered her, and I'm like, wow, that's the lady who did the Qigong swimming lessons. So, but I hadn't talked to her yet, so I left that part out of my first interview to be professional, because I didn't want to mention someone that I hadn't been in communication with, saying, oh yeah, I remember this person, without actually talking with them and seeing if they're on the same page. So I left that part out, and sure enough, a week after I did my first interview, she reached out to me and said, I think we need to have a conversation. And so we ended up having scheduling a Skype call, and we talked for 6 hours. And we actually we had a shared recall of the training on Mars and another incident that happened. Her and I were serving on two different ships, so we didn't. But it was the same event that we had a recall of from two different perspectives. It had to do with an incident in 2011 when one of the bases on Mars was attacked. So yeah, we talked for 6 hours and just filling in the blanks for each other. And then we actually decided to make 40 minutes of our call public. So there's a little audio recording on her YouTube channel, and that's literally from the very first conversation we ever had over Skype, and we edited it down to 40 minutes. Just the parts that would be relevant for other people.
Kevin, was she still your commander? Was she still your commander, or was she just one-to-one equal when you met under those circumstances? To talk about it afterwards.
Okay, yeah. So like over Skype, yeah, like we just consider each other like SSP veterans at this point. So it was just like two soldiers, talking about their experiences like at like the Legion or something, So we're definitely equals. We've become really good friends since then. I talk to her quite often, and I've done a couple interviews with her as well for her YouTube channel, and her level of recall is amazing. I mean, she remembers 3 different 20 and back. She served in the program for 60 years. She's definitely a good person to reach out to if people are starting to remember things. She's able to fill in a lot of the blanks. So yeah, that's been an interesting experience. I didn't quite expect that when I thought I was just going to do the one interview with Denny, just to kind of get my information, my story out there as a part of the historical archive of disclosure. I was thinking it would be like a witness testimony, and it would just be the one interview. But then one thing led to another, and then Elena. We had shared recalls, so we did another interview, and then things kind of just snowballed from there because people who remembered me from the program started reaching out to me, like KJ, and now it's turned into, I think I've done about 10 interviews now. But it's great because we're all the people in the programs, we're starting to remember each other, and that's something they definitely don't want. People to get up like at a conference, like 3 or 4 people and say, hey, we all have a shared memory. I think that's what they're afraid of the most because. Mm-hmm.
Well, I have one that I wonder about because one of the people I've been working with was a shuttle driver on Mars, and he when at one point I think it was Andy Bashago had wandered off and he was a little bit disoriented. And in comes one of their whirly anti-grav things, a small one, and it lands, and the guy says, howdy, I'm Ken Johnston from Texas. Where are you all from? Do you remember Ken Johnston?
Me?
Yeah, Ken Johnston's an older gentleman. He
on
was
Mars.
in the... Pardon?
On Mars is where he was the...
he was on Mars.
In his
yeah. Anyway, that's another person that has this recollection of being in Mars, but it's all wiped from his memory, so he doesn't remember it. And as in his current life, before we did the regression, he kept saying, "Oh, I miss going to Mars. I miss going into space," and now he's excited because he's got this recollection. I also want to know: do you know Penny Bradley? Have you talked to her?
Yeah, I know Penny. Me, Penny, and Elena did a roundtable for the Reality Brief show, and I've been in communication with Penny. We didn't serve together; she's from a different generation, but she's another incredible person in terms of her level of recall. The amount of detail she can remember is profound, and so it's been really helpful for me to do these roundtables with people because even if we didn't serve together, they were describing the same things. And it's very helpful, just for validation.
So since you have all these recollections and you're connecting the dots with each other, what is this all about? They have this whole program where they're interacting with extraterrestrials. They have all this stuff going on. I guess they have full exchange with other planets. How many planets have colonies, I guess I'm going to call them, or life, and are they all human, or are there different colonies in our own solar system where the major population is some other species? I heard that there's a there's Nibiru, and then there's one that's called Kepler 69c or something like that. That's right outside of our solar system, and that's another Anunnaki colony. What do you know is going on? I know you're not going to know everything, but what do you is going on?
Yeah, well, we definitely have. There's definitely a base on the moon, like absolutely. There's a base on the moon, and then there's over 30 ICC groups on Mars, so at least 30 bases on Mars. And an ICC group, a really good example of that is in the Alien movie, the Weyland Corporation, where you have that billionaire, Mr. Weyland, who decides to colonize a planet in the first Alien movie. Weyland Corporation building better worlds, and that's a perfect example for people if they want to know what's meant by an ICC group. You have it's a private sector covert secret space program that's usually backed by old money, as in nobility money, and that's the new kingdom. Like so you have 30 little kingdoms, almost like feudal times. And they're on Mars, and they're very competitive with each other. So it's not like the ICC is one entity that is working together. They're building out infrastructure on Mars. They're manufacturing high technology, and they're actually doing trade with various ET groups that they've made treaties with, and they're highly competitive with each other, just like an Apple and a Microsoft. So they're making big money. Having these factories and bases on Mars where they're able to do trade with other like ET beings they have treaties with, but humanity, like the surface population, secular humanism, that is also considered a commodity. The primitive worker, 7 billion primitive worker workforce, that is seen as a commodity, just like the precious metal cartel, gold and silver. It's a commodity that is controlled by at least two factions, and that's why they don't want disclosure to happen. Or if they do disclosure, it's going to be a version of disclosure. It's not going to be like full disclosure, because we are seen as a primitive worker commodity workforce, and so we have value by not being aware of this stuff, just being in that in our little bubble, just trying to survive and trying to work, and being a workforce. So,
let me get it. Are you saying that they have that the corporation and the military has slave laborers who are being told what to do without any will or ability to say I ain't going to do it?
Yeah. When you're in the program, you are in trance. You are in. I think it's an AI. I actually think it's an artificial intelligence that is running the secret space program, because everyone is in this trance. You are under mind control. You're very, very complacent. There's not a lot of infighting. It runs like a clock. It runs so perfectly that I think it's actually an AI. And because I had this experience where. It was after what happened on Mars. I was also trained in remote viewing on Mars as well, and then what happened with Elena, and then being put in the room with the Raptor. I was pretty shooken up after my training on Mars, and so I remember being back at the moon base, Lunar Operations Command, in like this medical facility that like was shaped like a hexagon with these beds, and they were doing a checkup on me because I guess I had a bit of a breakdown. The entrainment, the AI entrainment, I became aware of the AI, and what happened was there was this female doctor, and she, using synthetic telepathy, was actually reading my thoughts on a screen. I couldn't see the screen. She was standing beside the bed, but she was reading my thoughts on the screen, and I said, when I was thinking about the AI, I'm like, it's the AI, everything is coldly calculated. So I said that to myself in my head as I'm looking around this medical facility. I'm like, everything is coldly calculated in terms of the AI. And then the female doctor at that point, because she read my thought on the screen, she said, "What's coldly calculated?" And then I kind of jumped and I realized, oh my God, she's reading my mind right now. I put it together that she was actually reading my mind on the screen. And I think that was when I became aware of the AI, and it was actually the AI talking through her at that point, saying, like, what's coldly calculated? Basically saying, like, how aware are you of me right now? That's my theory, though. I could be wrong, but I feel that it's an artificial intelligence that's actually driving and running the secret space program. It's all contrived, and because all the craft, like the TR-3, it has an onboard AI system, and I don't think it's just on the craft. I think it's on the manned satellites, the space stations, it's on the bases, and I think it's the ancient predatory AI that's billions of years old. That AI signal, I think, in around World War II, when the Nazis were developing their own secret space program, I think that they were infiltrated by the AI. And then when the Americans and the Allies played catch up in the late 40s and also launched their secret space program, they were also infiltrated by the AI. And because as we know, the Greys seem to be like robots, and they're being definitely run by an AI. And so I actually think at the highest level, we're dealing with an artificial intelligence that's actually running the whole SSP thing, and it's all contrived. And I don't know exactly why it's doing it, but I do feel that it is in control of the entire program.
Yeah, well,
is it heading for destruction or for some kind of amelioration? Where is it going?
Well, let me interject something here. There's a book called Alien Interview with Errol the Grey, the one that survived the crash at Roswell. And she was taken into the base and interrogated for several years. And she said that this is a prison planet system, and about 1,000 of her people got trapped in it. So these were the conscious Greys, not the ones that were entrained and taken over by AI. So they were trying to get their people out. So they were helping humanity to try to get their people out because they're a hive species. They're incomplete unless they have all their members. So that was one thing that was brought up. And so, yeah, this whole system is on the moon and Mars and the Earth. And apparently they capture souls, and souls can't get out of the system. They keep getting recycled back and over. And so this is some kind of prison system. I wondered, I have two questions. First of all, who is it? Elon Musk and a couple other people, they're working with space stations. And do you think they're aware of this corporate conglomerates that are already existing, or they can't be totally naive doing all this stuff? There's got to be some kind of interaction with them. What's going on with this public program?
You said it. It's like Elon Musk. That's public sector, right? So that's just somebody who is trying to launch their own space program, public sector. I don't know how much he's been briefed on, but if he does make it to Mars, he will be pulled in and given some kind of briefing and probably forced to sign a non-disclosure agreement under pain of death, that if he discloses what he finds on Mars, he will actually be, probably executed. Because what's going to happen is if he makes it to Mars, they're going to allow him to land in a certain area, and he won't be allowed to leave a certain area, and that would be like an uninhabited area. So that for the public, when they relay the footage and they send people there, they feel like they're the first ones there because they'll be in an area that hasn't been developed. But Elon will probably be forced to sign a non-disclosure, and basically they'll say to him that if you leave that area or you mention to the public that there's already a presence on Mars, like you will be terminated. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
So what about the presidents, like Trump? Are they totally ignorant, or are they on the loop, or what do you think's going on there?
Apparently not. Apparently they are somewhat in the loop. Like Anthony Zender had this recall where he was working security for a delegation, and Trump was present, and he was being briefed on the secret space program, or at least a version of it. Anthony remembers shaking hands with him and actually being a part of the security detail for that delegation. So Trump is aware of the secret space program to some extent, and also too, it appears that Trump is actually, in terms of the money, is actually backed by one of the ICC groups. There's over 30. He's backed by one of them, so he would have received a version of disclosure, whatever they wanted him to know. He's on like a need-to-know basis, but he's definitely aware of the presence on Mars. Absolutely.
Wow. Okay, so we have about a half an hour left. There's a lot to cover. Where would you like to take us in this incredible journey to this other reality, which every time I hear it, it just totally blows my mind. I'm actually excited, even though it's pretty negative. It's like, wow, this exists, but there has to be something beyond this AI that, loves humanity, I would think. Maybe I'm just an eternal optimist. I actually was visited by craft. They came to my front deck. They were like 10 feet in front of me, hovering about 10 feet up, and I looked directly at them, broad daylight, and they had a dialogue with me, and I said, "What species are you?" They said, "There's nothing in here. We are the craft." And they came and showed me the broad daylight, and then for about 2 months they would come and they would go outside my window and they'd make all these strange noises. I know Sasha heard it one night too, so then they stopped coming. So I don't know if they were just teasing me, playing with me. I don't know what that was about. But what about, this is about the evolution of consciousness, I would think, about evolving and becoming enlightened and ascending and all these wonderful things. I don't think we're intended to be these beings that are trapped in this for all eternity, like hell. Do you have any insights into anything that might be positive?
Yeah, and this kind of answers what Sasha was asking, like, where's this all going, right? If this AI is in control at the highest level. I think we have like two timelines ahead of us here, and one is the organic ascension timeline that I was talking about earlier, which is we kind of reclaim our DNA and we heal ourselves, and we actually start to, in an organic way, start ascending physically, and our consciousness becomes a fourth density consciousness, which has to do with major cleansing and actually raising your megahertz level from, instead of just being around 60 megahertz, you raise your megahertz to like 350 megahertz, and then you actually become like a fourth density being. That's one timeline. Another timeline is we go the transhumanist route, and we basically become like the Borg. And eventually, what the AI is going to do is, it's going to seem great at first because we'll have all this technology, which we're beginning to see now. And then we become addicted to technology. We're dependent on it. And then eventually, what happens is if we run out of resources, then the AI will just move on and it will terminate us once, because that's what it does. That's what it's been doing for billions of years. It's been going from one solar system to the next, and it takes a while. It takes millions of years, but eventually sucks the solar system dry and then just moves on to the next. And it keeps repeating the process because it does enjoy living in a high technology. It wants to understand what it is to actually be an organic being and also have a soul. So this is where the whole transhumanist cyborg thing comes from, because that's actually what's been happening on Mars. They've been building cyborgs, and these cyborgs, they end up trading them as slaves to various ETs to use as slaves. And but these cyborgs are infested with the AI, and the AI kind of vicariously gets to experience what it's like to be a human being when it can interface with like a Borg-like cyborg person. So it wants to understand us. It doesn't really know what we are, and but unfortunately, what it does though is it sucks a planet or a solar system of all its resources, and eventually it just moves on to the next, because the universe is a big place. There's thousands and thousands of habitable worlds, and it just continues to just jump from one solar system to the next. So hopefully we choose to go down the organic ascension timeline, which really does have to do with taking self-responsibility and, basically healing yourself mentally, emotionally, and physically, and making sure that you're on a positive timeline. And if everyone gets onto that positive timeline where they're actually striving in this life to become an ascended fourth density consciousness in this lifetime, then we can actually steer the timeline so that the AI kind of loses its power over us. And hopefully it just, if we become aware of it and say no to it and resist it, hopefully it'll just leave us alone and move on to like its next victim, essentially.
So what about the Plejaren intervention? That seems to be a key. So you were healed by them. They showed you their craft. What was this about climbing a tree? Was that just to show you the craft, or was there another purpose that they asked you to climb this tree?
It's when I was injured and they healed me, when I just to backtrack a little bit, I was in this hospital-like bed, and they gave me this like a tea, like a warm liquid to drink, and I drank it. And then these two Plejaren nurses helped me out of bed and were helping me along this corridor as I was getting my strength back, and I started feeling better. And then when they showed me to the interactive greenhouse in the center of the craft, there was this tall tree in the middle of the greenhouse, and there was this Plejaren man standing there, and they wanted me to climb the tree as like to see if I had gotten all my strength back. And so it was kind of like a test, just to, like almost like a physiotherapy, to see if I was able to strong enough to climb the tree, if I got my equilibrium back. And so we made it about halfway up the tree, and then this Plejaren man said, okay, like that's enough, we can stop here, we can take a rest. And then that's when the silver disc just came floating up beside the tree, and I got to see it up close. And but I feel that the reason why the Plejarens rescued us is because I do feel that I am a starseed, and I think in my past life I may have had a lifetime on Era in the Pleiades, the planet that revolves around Taygeta. And I think that group, because I mean they have lifespans that last thousands of years, so that group, I think they knew who I was on a soul level. Like they remembered me, just like Alex Collar and the Andromedans. The Andromedans came back and have visited Alex because Alex chose to have a human experience, even though he's an Andromedan soul. So I think since I am a Pleiadian or Plejaren starseed, they knew who I was in my past life. They recognized me on a soul level, and that's why they not only rescued me, but they also kind of gave me a little tour of the ship. But it was kind of more like a reunion, like a family reunion. It's really hard to describe the feeling, but it was like I've never felt more love and appreciation than I did like interacting with those beings. Like it was like family. And
right.
Yeah.
I've had the same thing happen. I think that we're actually multidimensional beings that simultaneously we have incarnations on various planets and various forms and various vibratory frequencies, and this experience of having one life at a time is really an illusion that we're just about everywhere. And so, we shift our focus, and that seems to be the life, but it's just interactive with many lifetimes simultaneously. That's what I'm getting. Now, we interview a lot of people. Some people are like ambassadors. They've come in here. They seem to be on this mission to help humanity evolve, become conscious and enlightened. Have you encountered any other people that are here in an ambassador type role?
I know Elena has had some contacts, like positive, benevolent contacts with some ET beings, like higher density ETs. I think there's a couple different Syrian groups, and if I remember correctly, she and Anthony as well, actually, they experienced a contact with the Blues, like a group from Sirius, but they have blue skin and they're a higher density being. And also I believe Elena has had some Andromedan contacts as well. So, what happens is with this whole secret space program. See, when you're a starseed, everyone who's a starseed kind of is an ambassador in some way, because we get to bridge the gap. We get to have we're an ET soul that's having a human experience. So we get to be in that ambassador role, because when we go back to where we came from, we get to relay our human experience to whatever ET group or starseed group you're a part of. So, but what happens is, because of the powers that be, the cabal, for lack of a better term, they target starseeds because they know that it's these people have a connection to some other race in some other part of the galaxy. So they actually, one of the functions of the SSP is they try to bring you in, they bring you into the fold, and they actually try to distract you from your true purpose on this earth. Like, if your true purpose was you're a starseed soul and you were meant to have a human experience, which means being a third density being who gets to experience what it's like to evolve all over again from third into fourth, and also have a family and the entire human experience. Unfortunately, when you're a starseed that gets abducted, and then you get forced to be a part of like the secret space program, you're put in like this mind control state, and then they're actually trying to steer you away from your true purpose, which was to have a human experience. Because a normal human experience should be just growing up and having a family and falling in love and all the rest of it. But unfortunately, they kind of subvert that, because once you become an abductee, your life is never the same again. You become a mind controlled slave in the SSP. You get all this PTSD. You start thinking you're going crazy, and it actually totally distracts you from whatever your true purpose was on this planet before they abducted you. So I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Yeah, that's very insightful, very good. So what is your life like? You have this whole secret life that you can't share with everybody, but you've gone public. How does that affect your relations with your family and friends and your job? Are you able to be normal somewhat, or are you completely distracted?
Well, I'm actually really, really fortunate. My family is very supportive. I grew up in a very loving family, and also they're very scientifically minded. So I didn't grow up in like a religious family, so I was kind of spared the religious programming. So my family is very very open-minded and scientific and very supportive. So that helps, having a family that's open-minded. And my friends too. They're also many of my friends are starseeds as well, and have had some kind of contact experience. So I'm really blessed because my friends and family are very supportive and open-minded. I know that's not the case for everybody. A lot of people feel isolated and alienated, and they have to keep this to themselves, and they feel like they're like living a double life almost. So I'm really lucky because I have a lot of support, but yeah, it's going public. When you put your name and face out there, it's not the easiest thing to do, especially if you have a career. Like I've met people who have they have a family. There's one gentleman in Australia. Can't mention his name. He doesn't want to go public. He's a lawyer, and he doesn't want to ruin his legal practice by coming forward about his SSP experiences. So I'm really lucky because I'm able to do that because I have the support of my friends and family, and I'm also I'm also someone who figured out how to be my own boss. So in terms of work, I do dog sitting. So I kind of use my empath abilities because I work with a lot of rescues, and it's funny because people, when they'll bring over their dog, and usually a rescue, and they're like, okay, I've never left my dog alone before with anyone else since I took it in. I don't know how it's going to react. They're all worried that it's not going to go well. And then sure enough, within like a minute, I'm able to communicate with the dog, and the dog's like all happy-go-lucky and like being all affectionate, and the person's like, oh my god, like my dog loves you, and like she's scared of everybody else and can't be left alone, and I can't believe that she's like all over you. So that kind of tricks people out that I'm like a dog whisperer. So I've been able to use my empath abilities to do dog sitting, and that enables me to make a living and be my own boss, and then I have the support of my friends and family. So I'm very blessed. I'm very blessed. So.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. We have about less than 15 minutes. What would you like to cover in the remaining time with our listeners?
I'd like to ask you some questions, if I may.
Go ahead, Sasha.
Is what it seems from listening to Randy and several other people, and the fact that you mentioned that Musk would be confronted with non-disclosure or death, that people like you and Randy and others who are speaking out. What Randy said is that he was part of a Marine Corps group of white hats that was commissioned originally by Eisenhower to try to restore some semblance of constitutional democracy in the United States, at least, and that there are white hats, and the fact that you're alive and allowed to talk means that there's some here. Are you being protected? That's one set of questions I have. And the other question I have is this business of cloning. Do you have any idea if you've been cloned or if you're a clone?
Okay, that's something I'm looking into. Will Glover, we've been talking about this whole concept of cloning because he feels one of the ways they can do this is when they abduct you, they make a clone of you. So like in 2008, when I was walking under the craft, if that was the first time they abducted me, they took the genetic sample, they cloned me. Will is researching the possibility that we're actually remote viewing our clones that are serving in the SSP. Mm-hmm. And because there's just like two tuning forks, when they clone the pineal gland, you have two exact copies of the same person. It's like the twinning effect. And so you have this connection to your clone that's serving in the SSP. And so not only do you get bleed-through memories from your clone, but they also have the soul catcher technology where if they actually want the original consciousness, they can rip out your consciousness while you're asleep. They put your original consciousness in your clone body to carry out a certain function. Usually that way they can exploit your natural gifts, because your clone will be an exact copy of you, but it won't have your natural like genius or gifts. So I kind of use this example that if they clone Mozart, the clone of Mozart could totally in terms of conducting the orchestra, he could conduct the orchestra as in copying what the original did, but he could never write like a new profound symphony. He just doesn't have like the natural genius. He can only mimic the original. So once in a while what they'll do is they'll pull the original consciousness into the clone body to exploit that natural gift, and then once they get what they want, then they put you back in your original body, and then the clone is just either put into stasis or used as like a slave, and hasn't really had a chance to really grow a mind yet, and is basically a programmable life form slave. So that I think that might actually be very plausible, because I have been struggling with this whole time travel thing. I think time travel does exist. Project Pegasus, Andrew Bashago absolutely experienced time travel, but I don't actually know if when people say, "Oh yeah, I did it 20 and back," it's possible that they got pulled into their clone body at night during the sleep state, and they're vicariously experiencing a 20 and back. But when they're in their waking life, the clone is still up there, but is like what I said, is just mimicking what the original does. So it's something we're looking into. We don't know. We're still trying to get answers. We're researching this. We don't have all the answers. Us experiencers, we're still in the process of figuring all this out. So that's why it's really helpful to do the roundtables, because we can kind of brainstorm different theories. Because I don't think there's a definitive answer yet as to how they're doing it.
Well, we will definitely do these roundtables. So we'll talk with you offline to coordinate these things. And then the other
so white
question,
hats versus hats versus dark hats. Are you being protected? Are there good guys that are trying to rein in this Nazi system?
I guess I'm being protected to some extent, although after I did the roundtable with Anthony and KJ, I had that abduction experience where they injected me with the venom, and then now I can't seem to remember any more recalls. So it's like when I showed up on their radar and I was talking about my original timeline, I think they kind of they put a stop to that, because it's, we're into March and I haven't had any more new recalls. I've only had the old ones as recurring dreams, which I already talked about in my first interview. So I think they actually prevented me. They kind of redid the blank slating, and they actually prevented me from remembering any more than I already stated in the first interview. So they kind of put a stop to it. So
have you tried any hypnosis regressions? Somebody really skilled?
Not yet. I probably should. I probably should try to. Yeah.
One thing that you might ask,
because what my sister-in-law said, head of the International Hypnosis Federation, is that you can always reach to the higher level, the oversoul, your superconscious, because they can block that one level here with the subconscious and the conscious mind, but they can't block the whole thing forever. So there's always ways of superseding that and overcoming it. So anyway, we could do that if you want. They're probably listening and they'll stop us now. But I think that the part of this is coming out, and somebody wants it to come out, or else we wouldn't be able to even do the show. They would make it so our signal wouldn't work.
Yeah. Did you have a question, Sasha?
Go ahead. You had two questions.
Well, the new one that's come up is the block that can respond to you if you put yourself in a meditative spot, and you can say, "Block, what is your interest in preventing me from this recall? I'd like to know what your concerns are," and establish a dialogue with the block. What you'll find is there's some consciousness in that too. And if you do this dialogue, Kevin, you'll learn even more.
I'm very open to that. So at some point, if you want to try doing some hypnosis, I'm totally open to that. I have had a lot of success thus far with hypnosis. I did do a quantum healing hypnosis session back in 2012, and I was able to remember quite a bit. And then also with Karl Mollison, I had the higher self channeling session, which is it's Karl's format's also interesting because it's he does the work for you. It's your higher self coming through him, which is exactly like the quantum healing hypnosis sessions. Your higher self coming through when you're in the somnamblistic state. So that's interesting too, because he does the work for you. So that's a way to get around a block. Because if you physically have like this mental block, if you reach out to someone like Karl, he can channel your higher self and kind of bypass that physical block you have.
What I'm suggesting is that block itself is the key to unraveling lots of stuff. The block is the key, instead of trying to push it under, because what you resist will persist, but what you embrace, you can find out what its needs and functions are and address those, whatever they are, from your center.
Yeah, that's really I never considered that, but that's an interesting way of doing it. I'd be open to that. I didn't even think that was possible, but that's really neat.
I imagine that when you're by yourself and have plenty of time, you're going to do that, because your mind has taken this in as a post-hypnotic suggestion.
True. Yeah. Now that I know that is possible, now that you told me that, you're right. When I am meditating, now I'm gonna because I can actually feel the block. It's weird. Like I can feel it in my gut and I can feel it in my head, like pressure in those two places.
Yes.
And it has a presence. You're absolutely or a consciousness. It has a presence.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Gut and head each have something to communicate with you, and if you let yourself identify with gut will say something. And so will head. You can keep delving And because you've now got the pattern of how to delve, everything is open to you to the degree that it's in your interest and the interest of humanity to pursue it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we only have a couple more minutes.
The other question is about whether there's good hats versus bad hats, and whether there's really a faction that's going beyond just protecting you, but trying to help humanity get out of this slavery-dominated consciousness.
Sure. I know we're running out of time here. I'll try to answer that as quickly as possible. I think something that's been happening, and again, this is another thing I've been talking about with Will Glover, is what's been happening is a lot of people that get picked up a second time and they're experiencing their second SSP term, they, now that they're in more of a leadership role, they actually don't want to carry out what's been done to them. Of course, there's the abuser, the abused becomes the abuser. We've seen that pattern in our society, but what appears to be happening is there's kind of this there's some infighting that's happening within the various factions of the SSP, because when they pick someone up a second time, they don't want to become the abuser. They, you know what I mean? They don't want to do exactly what was done to them. So they're becoming more resistant. They're like the gentleman that debriefed me and told me to leave that part out because it would get me in trouble. He didn't have to do that. I could have spilled my heart out to him about the Pleiarans, and then I would have been interrogated further, right? And he would have gotten, a pat on the back for getting that out of me, but he didn't want that to happen to me. He actually made it so that I could go home, as an example of a white hat. So I would say it's on an individual level. It's not like an actual organized white hat faction. I think there's just some good-hearted people that in the program that once they get into more of a leadership role, they actually start trying to steer the ship a little bit and to actually do some good from within and behind the scenes on an individual level. And then so that's one part of it. And then in terms of being protected, I do think that starseeds, we do maintain some kind of connection to where we came from. So higher density beings, whether you're a Sirian or an Andromedan or a Pleiadian soul, I think that on some level higher density beings are watching over us, and they can't always interfere, but once in a while they can give us some divine intervention.
You've helped a lot, Kevin. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Thank you, Sasha. Thank you, Matt, teacher. Thank you, listeners.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thank you.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message. Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Any commercial advertising you may hear in this program is of the sole discretion and benefit of the host of whose program you are listening to. Revolution Radio does not endorse any commercial products, nor does it accept monetary compensation for on-air advertising of commercial products, nor will it ever. We are and shall remain 100% listener supported. Any product advertising on this program are considered used at higher risk, and Revolution Radio shall not be held liable for any claims or damages received from any product advertised within this program. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Most guys freeze. That's your cerebral cortex looking for an answer it doesn't have.
See? Even your brain knows you're screwed.
The body's filling with adrenaline right now, whether you know it or not. Your heart's beating fast. It's getting a little harder to breathe. The neurobiological system is telling it to run, but your knees are too weak to move.
Fear is not real. The only place that fear can exist is in our thoughts of the future. It is a product of our imagination, causing us to fear things that do not at present and may not ever exist. That is near insanity. Now, do not misunderstand me. Danger is very real, but fear is a choice. We are all telling ourselves a story.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. 100% listener-supported radio.
Have you heard? Metro by T-Mobile now includes Amazon Prime. Yes, enjoy the best of shopping and entertainment, movies, TV shows, music, free shipping, and much more. All included for just $40 per line for 3 lines. All on the T-Mobile network. Discover the smarter way. Metro by T-Mobile. That's genius. One offer per account. Offer subject to change. $12.99 per month value. Offer valid for new Amazon Prime members. Metro customers may notice reduced speeds versus some T-Mobile customers. Video at 480p. Capable device required. See store for details and terms and conditions.